Hey, don't flame me for this one, I am just responding to an article. So today what I wanted to turn your attention to was this piece on 1967sports.ca. Now, based off of the website name, you probably know what kind of content this media website cultivates towards. Of course, it is a Toronto Maple Leafs discussion board. And this article by Paul Brooks was published the other day on October 12th, and it got a lot of Leafs fans up in arms. Let's take a look at what this piece from a few days ago goes out there and says, should the Maple Leafs sign Phil Kessel? Now, Kessel, if you wanted to get the status update on the lore, just in case you're a little bit of a newer hockey fan, he was one of the best Toronto Maple Leafs in the 2010s. He was probably the best one. If you wanted to talk about other guys like JVR, Bozak, Dion Phaneuf, James Reimer, that era of Toronto hockey, Phil Kessel was pretty much the main guy. He had multiple 80-point seasons as a member of the Toronto Maple Leafs. He was scrutinized by the media because he was fat, he was lazy, he ate hot dogs. All this stuff with the media was really ugly in regards to the way Phil Kessel was treated. And eventually he was traded over to the Pittsburgh Penguins, won a few cups, bounced around to a few other teams. He was in Arizona, he was in Vegas, he won the cup with Vegas again for the third time in his career last season. And he is the reigning NHL Ironman. At the time of recording this audio, he has not played a game in 23-24, but that does not diminish his Ironman streak because the Ironman only applies to games that he is eligible to play. Had Phil Kessel signed a contract with some team at the start of the offseason and he was a scratch afterwards, then that Ironman streak would have come to an end, but because he is technically not on a team and therefore not eligible for any games, the Ironman streak is still his for the taking. Now, the idea that is proposed in this piece is whether or not the Leafs should get their hands back into the world of Phil Kessel, and the different arguments are presented in the piece. There is a discussion about the love-hate affair, how Phil's history with the Leafs is nothing short of a roller coaster. He was a constant point of contention. Some saw him as a laid-back, aloof star who didn't quite fit the traditional mold. Others adored him for the very same reasons. His love of hot dogs made him a meme in the Toronto media. Fans seemed to care more about his off-ice antics than his stat lines. For a period of time, Phil Kessel was as much part of Toronto's culture as the CN Tower, for better or for worse. There's a discussion here about how he was a proven winner, how he had won a bunch of Stanley Cups, how also he's got 992 career points. Surely he is interested in the 1,000 milestone. Beyond the numbers, Phil still loves the game, he wants to return, and he's even announced to teams that he's willing to forego his Ironman streak, and he's willing to sit out games and play a part-time role. There also is a conversation about Jason Spezza and how that was a brilliant story that we had seen round itself out in Toronto at the end of Spezza's playing career. But of course, when it comes to Kessel and the way he is as a player, last season he had 36 points in 82 games played. The year before that, 52 points in 82. I mean, he's played 82 games for years now. He's always maxed out his games played. That's kind of why he is the Iron Man. Sure, it is a few years removed from Kessel being a point-per-game, 80, 90-point guy like he was in the Penguins. The stints with Arizona were more so of him just playing the game and doing what it is that he wanted to do. The Coyotes were not good, and Kessel was just given a spot to boost his numbers and get a few points here and there. Last season with Vegas, though, he wasn't really needed. He wasn't really the MVP like he had been in other years. This is mostly because Kessel, as he has gotten older, because the guy is 36 years old right now, he has gotten a little bit slower, he has been a little bit less useful in middle to bottom sixes, and for a team like Vegas that had such a good top six, you didn't really have room for Kessel. You could say the same thing as there with the Toronto Maple Leafs. Like, you know, if the Leafs bring Kessel in, they're not playing him with Matthews. That's not really something that's foreseeable based off of how Kessel has developed over the past few years. And so if you wanted to bring him onto the team, you probably would have to resort to giving him a bottom six role. And is that really something you think is worth it? Here's the verdict written about on this same article. By the way, link is going to be in the description if you want to read more about this piece. There is a little bit more that we did not talk about in this video. Should the Leafs sign Phil Kessel? The writer on 1967sports.ca asks. Well, bottom six forwards are pretty interchangeable in today's NHL. Whether you have Phil or Joe Schmo bouncing between the fourth line and the press box, it won't make or break a team. What does matter is the storyline. Leafs fans have gone through trial and tribulation over the last 56 years, especially in the 2010s. And for better or for worse, Phil was our star, our hero, for a chunk of that. He was a great player in a rough era. We need to give him one last shot. It will be a great ending to one hell of a story. And sure, you could give the Mighty Ducks speech, you could give the storylines here. Oh, what if Phil signs with Toronto, he plays in a bottom-of-the-middle six role, he maybe gets second power play time, and the Leafs win the cup. How cool would it be to have John Tavares lifting Lord Stanley's Grail and passing it off to Phil Kessel? Then Kessel goes to Matthews, Matthews goes to Marner, Marner then goes to Samsonov, and the rest of the parade follows through. Obviously, that's a fairy tale storybook ending. But is it really plausible? Firstly, you have to make sure that the Toronto Maple Leafs are in a position to actually win the gosh darn thing, and if you wanted to just have Phil Kessel on for the lulz, it wouldn't really fit too much with the bill, I feel. Like, Brad Treliving has created a different type of identity, supplementing onto the top-tier forwards of this team. You've brought in guys like Reeves, you've brought in guys like Bertuzzi and Domi, and other guys that can carry their weight physically, playing throughout the bottom six. You just traded away Sam Lafferty a while ago because he needed to create cap space. If you sign Phil Kessel to fill in that type of a role in your team, I feel like that's kind of irresponsible to the way that Phil is as a hockey player. In fact, this same article was posted onto the Maple Leaf sub, and you could see all the replies are saying, no, it would be kind of pointless, this is not really something they should do. Here's an actually cohesive comment written by unique user Lame. Nah, the Leafs shouldn't sign Kessel, there's nowhere to put him. He doesn't generate enough offense anymore to be in the top six, and he doesn't have enough defensive ability to play bottom six with the kids and the grinders. Honestly, he isn't much of anything anymore other than a guy who could pot a few and be a warm body on a struggling team to try to bridge the gap for their younger, more promising guys to come up. He doesn't have a role here anymore, and I'm saying this as a huge Kessel fan. There are some other comments talking about whether or not Phil would actually want to sign in Toronto again, whether he wants to go through that entire thing once more, and then there's a bigger discussion as to whether or not it's worth it to take away spots from the younger guys to give it to an aging vet like Phil. At least with Jason Spezza, there was a really good role he had on this team. He was a very useful player that had really clutch moments too in the postseason. Like, I really can't articulate just how much of a beast Jason Spezza was when he was a part of the Toronto Maple Leafs and towards the end of his career, pretty much. For Phil, you can't really guarantee that same level of success, nor versatility throughout the bottom middle parts of your forward core. So, just in my opinion, it's not really something that's worth exploring, but of course, in theory, in hypothetical situation land, it feels like a really good story that could happen if you can guarantee positive results from this Maple Leafs team. If you know the Maple Leafs are going to win the Stanley Cup, why not sign Phil Kessel and bring him onto your squad? Have the Iron Man come back onto your team, and a decade removed from the terrible Game 7 Boston collapse, finally find himself a way to win the Stanley Cup, bringing it home for the first time since 1967, making it past the second round for the first time in decades. Phil Kessel had a really storied tenure with the Maple Leafs, but maybe nostalgia, rose-tinted glasses are a little bit misguided here. So let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. How do you feel about the idea of the Toronto Maple Leafs acquiring Phil Kessel as a random free agent guy sometime this year? Would you want to run it back with Phil? Is this an idea that you actually think is worth exploring? Link is going to be in the description if you want to go ahead and read the article, as well as if you want to read the extended comments made by the R Leafs guys. But I hope you enjoyed this video, and bye.